In this week's episode, Audrey Lloyd shares insights from her up and coming book. It's called Bold: Reign in Your Mind, Reign in Your Career. And I love the theme that drives the book and our conversation. What are you great at? And we lead that back into how you might find engagement in your workplace. Hello, and welcome to Love as a Business Strategy, a podcast that brings humanity to the workplace. We're here, as always, to talk about business, and we like to tackle those topics that most business leaders tend to shy away from. And we believe that humanity and love should be at the center of every successful business. We're here to have conversations and hear stories about how real people and real businesses operate. Before we begin, I'm your host, Jeff Ma, and my co-host today is the one and only Maggie McClurkin. Maggie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Jeff. Thanks.
Where's your dog Lincoln? Is he around? Is he in the room?
He's at my feet right now.
Okay, excellent. I hope he makes a little bit of an appearance later. Our guest today is Audrey Lloyd. Audrey is a business and personal transformation expert. She's an advisor and coach, a professional speaker, and also author of Bold: Reign in Your Mind, Reign in Your Career. She's a communication strategist and change leader with over 25 years of experience across a ton of different industries, but always focusing on the people side of change. So I'm really excited to dig into that with you today. Welcome to the show, Audrey.
Thank you.
And do you have any pets around you?
I do not, but I love dogs.
Yes, Maggie has the best dog, and I hope you'll see later. Anyways, we like to start with some icebreakers, and Maggie, I'm going to put you on the spot because, I always keep these a secret until the show. So today's question for both of you, Maggie, I'll go with you first. What's your favorite food to cook?
Oh, my favorite food to cook? That's a good question. I really like making this specific banana bread recipe because I have a tendency to buy too many bananas, as we all do. I saw this TikTok recently that was like, I've reached my peak adulthood. I bought 5 bananas at the grocery store and I ate them all this week. I don't think I've ever done that. Nope. But I always have extra bananas, and it calls for 3 overly ripe bananas. And it's the best banana bread recipe I've ever had. It's got like cinnamon sugar in it, and it's swirled, and it's so good. It only lasts about a day and a half in my house after it's made, but I love it because it feels like I'm not wasting.
Well, I can't wait to try that because I'm going to make you make me some. Audrey, same question. What's your favorite food to cook?
Well, I'm not much of a baker, and I don't want to be a braggadocious person, but I'm an excellent cook. So really, I like to recreate recipes. Prior to the pandemic, when I went out much more for, eating out at restaurants, I would try to recreate whatever I would have at a restaurant. And I love spices from all over the world. So I can cook just about anything. I mean, I'm a vegetarian, but I would say my favorite thing to cook is probably seafood.
Is there a specific seafood dish or a specific seafood type that you particularly enjoy?
I'm very good at making shrimps and very, very good at making any kind of, I would say, whitefish.
Yum.
Fun fact about me, if there's shrimp and grits on a menu, I am getting that no matter what else is on the menu.
Dang.
Most cases.
Yum.
Most cases. Okay, so let's kick things off. Audrey, obviously, I want to start with your story, I guess. I always say this, and some people get intimidated because they think they have to share their whole life story. No, I'm curious, Audrey, tell me mainly around like what brought you here today, not to this show, but to this point in your life. Mm-hmm. What are your passions? Tell me about those.
Wow, I love telling my story. Thank you for that. So, I like to start at the beginning. So I sound like I'm from the Midwest, but I was actually born in the UK and lived in Jamaica and the West Indies until the age of 5. And then I relocated to the United States and grew up in Western Massachusetts in back of actually the old Basketball Hall of Fame. If you're a basketball fan and you know where the new Basketball Hall of Fame is. Went to University of Massachusetts, studied journalism. went into the insurance industry straight after and have had a number of different transitions in terms of career. And most recently, well, I shouldn't say most recently because I've been coaching people all along, but most recently, as of a year ago, I did get certified as a professional coach. And so I coach people at multiple levels. And in addition to that, I just recently wrote a book. And as you said, it's called Bold, Reigning Your Mind, Reigning Your Career. And so I think it's the culmination of everything that I basically have said, my whole journey, my whole career life, and all the things that I have really learned that I've tried to, compile in that book to share.
Awesome. Books. Wow. They're a lot. A lot of work goes into writing those and what made you kind of take the plunge? Like what drove you to decide to write a book and tell me about that journey?
Yeah, so it's funny because I have written bits and pieces of this book over the last 8 years. And I've always said I wanted to write a book. But it took me a while, I would say, to find my voice. Like, what do I have to say that's going to be of value to people? And I absolutely love organizations and doing my work in regards to transformation, and have had a lot of lessons learned in my own personal career, and has worked very, very closely with companies, particularly HR. So I've seen also the transformation in companies and in individuals. And so I really just wanted at this point, based on everything that I have seen and known, to write something that was going to be really inspirational, right? And to really inspire people to really look within, to see their best self, and to understand that they are unique and uniqueness is a gift, and that we need more of that. We don't need more of the same. We need more people who are able to be authentic and unique and offer their skills and capabilities. And of course, with pandemic, we had time, right, to reflect and think. And so it was really just the right moment.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Amazing.
I'm wondering, like, I'm sure you've heard like success stories from people who've read your book and spoken to them and really resonated with them. What kinds of people or what kinds of success stories have you heard
Mhm.
from just that message? It's so powerful.
Well, a lot of what I have in the book really is from my hundreds of hours of coaching people. As part of the
Mm,
certification, you have to be certified at the PCC level, professional level. You have to coach over 500 hours. And so
wow.
I had the privilege for people to invite me and to allow me to go on the journey with them. And so I've had so many stories, and I feel like I've met so many remarkable individuals that, they have said, yes, you helped me, and I hope that I've helped them. But they've also helped me too, right? In
Mm,
sharing their stories and enable me to see that we are all really great. It's just that, how they say that there are blind spots. Sometimes we have blind spots for ourselves, that we really can't see our true talent and capability. And so I think that when I coach most people, because I do a lot of mindset coaching as well, that many people will start out very humble, and it's good to be humble. I'm humble, right? But I think along the line, just peeling back and really looking at and asking the question, what makes you great? The biggest success story for me is for an individual to come to a session and be emotional about that question, right? In terms of, I don't know how to answer that question. I don't really know what makes me great. And then at the end, right, of our journey together, for that person to look me in the face and tell me, yeah, this is what I do. This is my values. And to be very proud of that. And to also, at the end of the line, get a career, get a position that's aligned with what they really wanted and what they're passionate about. I mean, I think that is success in itself.
mm. So
I
you
love that.
essentially at the root of what you do are like helping people answer that question, like, what am I great at?
Yeah, and it's not an easy question.
Yeah.
It's not, you would think that many people, because I mean, we're all, these days in particular, you show your best face, right?
Mm,
You all want to be perfect. You never
Mhm.
want to look as if you have any imperfections. But when you really say to someone, well, tell me what makes you really absolutely great? What is your gift? What is your talent? It's a little bit of a pause, a little bit of a pause, or you might hear the work story. And I would say, well, no, 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 don't tell me the work story in terms of what you're doing now, because that's just one step on the journey. tell me, almost like how we started out the session, tell me your story. What makes you great? What about your background and your heritage, where you grew up, your talents and your capabilities, what you've learned, what you've experienced, how you
Mhm.
see the world? That's what really makes you great, right? And really being able to step into that and own it and make a contribution as as a result of leveraging that as well.
I love that. I love that so much. I think there was a list of like the worst interview questions ever, and all of them were just like, every cliche, what are your greatest strengths, what are your like those types of questions along the way. And I don't think we ask enough what you're asking, which is like who we are at our core, right? Like who we are as people, and what value do we bring to the table that's not related to a technical skill or a specific experience, work related. Like I think people have so much to offer and bring to the table as just who they are and what they bring in their character and in their and just in what they bring to a team in terms of that dynamic. And yeah, I don't think that's often looked at enough.
Mm. I'm curious if you've experienced, Audrey, like if people are able to answer that question, what are you great at, about others more easily than they're able to answer it about themselves.
Yeah, I do think, but I would say that when you're answering that question for others, is that the public face or is that the private face, right? That you're answering that question based on. So like I said, many of us have a public face, right? So we see what people want us to see. It's very curated in
Mhm.
regards to that. But, the journey to bold, particularly with the book, is really going inside and making that assessment for yourself. And also being able to see people beyond the cosmetics of what they look like or how they're dressed or how they wear their hair. Can you really see them? Can you see their gifts and capabilities? Can you see their humanity? Can you see what contribution that they can make? That's really seeing people. So to answer your question at that level, maybe not.
Yeah.
If we go on, oh yeah, someone's social media post or the brand that the person's wearing or how they're styling their hair, they look great. Yeah, I could say, well, she's really put together and she's very articulate and she has it all.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
Uh,
Thanks for answering that.
I think one thing I'm curious about the book. It came out late last year, correct? Is that when it was 20? Was it
So actually, no.
when?
So you might be there's another book called Bold, but my book is actually coming out. It's not out as yet.
Coming out. Okay,
It's
excellent.
coming out. Yeah.
Okay, so it's on its way out. Um, so I'm curious how much of the pandemic is in the book. I've asked because
Mhm.
in doing podcasting, even this era, it seems to be like everything is going to have pandemic, you know, flavor to it. I mean,
Mhm.
it's changed everything. There's nothing that has come out unscathed or unchanged in the last 2 years. And in fact, the book that we published, Love as a Business Strategy, kind of came out like right like in the beginning ish of the pandemic. At least we were done writing it, and we actually like we talk about it all the time. Like there's so many things we like to add and amend and like do a
Mhm.
second edition to because of the pandemic. It's taught us so much, it's exposed so much, and it's cool that you have a book coming out soon. Did you get a chance to like really talk about the pandemic in your book?
So I don't mention the word pandemic.
Sure.
However, I do talk about the future of work a lot. And
Mm,
I give one of the reasons to be bold, to really know who you are, your value, your capability, what you can contribute, that there is a reason to be bold. And the reason is that we're going to need that in an uncertain future. And it's not to be scary, but I think the pandemic was an uncertain future,
mhm.
right? It's an accelerated future. And so when you know who you are and you have that foundation, regardless of what's going on around you, you have an anchor, right? And so that's the take that I have on it. And that's how I brought pandemic into the fold in terms of the book.
So outside of the book, then, I'm still really curious about your perspective around how the pandemic has affected, the things that you've been passionate about for so long. You've been coaching for so long. So the
Yeah.
majority of your time has been I just use the word pandemic as a wholesale kind of like, last 2 years, but
Sure.
it's have things changed, and what has and what hasn't for you?
Yeah. So I think for all of us, the pandemic created a period of pause. And I think when there's pause, there's time for reflection and to get insight about yourself and about the world. And for myself, I know that I made a commitment that during the pandemic that I was going to plant seeds. Planting seeds meaning networking, getting to know more people, getting to know more myself, gaining skills that I'll need coming out of the pandemic, thinking in terms of what will companies need, what will individuals need, and also being there for the people that I coached, because I think that, yes, I was focused on getting them because I'm an action oriented, coach, but getting them where they need to be, but also just being there for them. I think the pandemic allowed me to really slow down, really listen more. And as a coach, you want to be present always, but we're truly present when we have no choice, but we're at home, right? We're a captured audience, right? So I think the pandemic forced that. And there are some negative things that came out of it, but I think there's some positive things as well, particularly the ability and the time that spent, I'm sure for many to reflect.
I love that. I think I relate to it quite a bit. I think it was hard for all of us, but it was a time that felt like, um, in a way, you didn't have a lot of options, you didn't have a lot of choices. So all you can do is kind of make progress on what you had control over, and you had really only control over your own mindset, your own views of, and how you took each day on one at a time. So I relate to what you're saying quite a bit. Um, were you still coaching people through this? I'm curious if you have any like stories or anecdotes of like coaching people, especially through business changes as well, of course, but
Yeah.
kind of as
Yeah.
people are looking to reinvent themselves during
Mhm.
this time, like what are your kind of success and failure stories there?
Yeah. So I think, one of the challenges during the pandemic is as with anything, when you're in something, in it, it's hard to see beyond it. And in the book, I talk about don't let your short term situation define your long term outlook.
Hmm.
And that is really a mantra to say, yes, today this is happening. But what do we need to do 6 months from now or a year from now? I do this a lot with businesses, obviously, when they look to transform. You're moving from the as is to the to be. And for individuals, it's the same thing. So I think the struggle is at times is to get people to really have that foresight, that forward vision to say, what can I see myself doing? In particular, the people who had lost their job. It was a hard time. It was uncertain. And to really say, that was the career or the job that you had, but can you reassemble yourself? Can you put yourself back together to present to the world in terms of what's needed now? Because some different skill sets are emerging. We know that, is particularly with future work, to be actually more human, which this is where love as a business strategy comes in, is hot now. It's now, right?
Mm.
That's what we need more of. And so to be able to say, yes, you have the technical capabilities, but can you listen and relate to others and understand where they're coming from? Yeah. And to be able to interpret things for people who maybe don't understand, and to also be a source of also motivation for yourself and also for others as well.
Yeah. Maggie, anything to add or hit on
Yeah,
this?
I love the like theme of you call yourself an expert on transformation and reinvention, all in that same vein. And I like just taking it, zooming out just a little bit, because we've been talking a lot on the individual level. Like, how have you seen full organizations or businesses go through that sort of transformation? It can be pre or post pandemic, but just in general, like, what does that look like for an organization that wants to go through something like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that saying, it takes a village. It definitely does. It does. It definitely requires a village to transform.
Hmm.
And at the same time, it requires each individual to change on an individual level. Because to change the whole, you have to change yourself. And each person has to be able to say, I'm aware, I understand, I'm going to make the commitment, and I'm going to actually make the change, and not just make the change, but sustain the change, right? And so a lot of that, I mean, of course, there's methodologies and practices that we put in place for change management, particularly working with leadership teams to model the change. But it's not just the words, it's also the behaviors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's, when you think of like an organization changing, it's really, literally from the inside out, like, who do we really want to become, so that we can show up like that to the world, to our customers, to our partners, to and for each other, really, as employees as well. So it's a journey, but it's a journey that requires many, but requires the commitment of one, right? Each individual added up together to able to churn, to make things different.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of the words like change management, and in some organizations, it just carries with it a lot of, just like, uh, I mean, in some organizations, to me, it carries that stigma of being very surface level, or
Mhm.
fake at times, because you're given directive as a job to go and communicate sometimes these cultural things that, to be honest, and we just talked about this, it requires a level of genuinity, right? It requires a level of honesty and vulnerability. How do you manage change management and get people engaged, especially in this landscape of, the Great Resignation? These people are tired of corporate
Mhm.
kind of BS. They're tired of being kind of tricked and gaslighted and all these things. How do you get people to act? Like you said, it requires everybody to have a mindset change. It requires everybody to be on board. How do you get people to really believe in that? How do you get people to actually engage with you if you're, a leader, or if you're in a space where, despite your even best intentions, they still might come off as disingenuous?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think, you use the word, Jeff, that I love, the word engagement. And I say the word quite a bit in bold in the book. Um, to be engaged is critical, because we know that engagement scores are low and have been low, not just in the United States, but globally, really. Um, eh, what for individuals to be engaged, at the heart of that is they have to care. They have to care. They have to have a sense of, accountability for for themselves and for what the organization is trying to achieve. They have to understand the reasons why they should believe, and their role in that change, to really to own it, and the reality of the change. Because I
Sure.
think many times people want to change, but we don't talk about what's happening now. We fast forward to what's going to be in the future, if we get there, right? So I think having people really see what's in it for them, obviously, but in the book I talk a lot about, if you're at a company that many people would think, well, it's the company's responsibility, it's the leader's responsibility to make sure that things happen. But as a post-pandemic future of work professional, we are accountable. And we've always said this, we're accountable for our own success, but we're also accountable for when we raise our hand and we accept a position. I would think that we want that company to be successful. We want that company to win. And if we don't, we have to ask the question, are we in the right place? So I think, I would hope that most individuals, when they understand the reasons for the change and their role in the change and how they will impact the change, that there's power in that, and that's sticky, and that they would make a commitment. They're actually disengaged versus disengaged, which is basically checked out. I don't care, whatever. I'll do the surface stuff, but I'm not going to really, do what it takes in the end.
Yeah, that engagement is so important, not just for like day to day getting stuff done, but to really have your employees be bought in to what you're doing as a business. Like it's almost impossible if you can't engage your employees first. And I love that you just that's such a big topic in your book. I
But
love
how do
that.
we
It's so
engage
important.
ourselves? I think that's really also the emphasis is regardless of the company, this is your
Mhm,
career. This is
mhm.
your life, and sure, not everyone is as passionate as the next person. But if we don't care about what it is that we're doing,
Right. Yeah, that's
yeah,
a really good point.
there's an opportunity, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and that connects it all, right? You said finding what you're really good at and finding what you really, you're bold is seems like it connects directly to that theme of finding your own engagement as well, right? Making sure that
Mm-hmm.
what you're passionate about or what you have confidence
Mm-hmm.
in that you bring to the table is also a part of what you bring to the table for your organization. Um, so yeah, that's something to think about for me personally, especially
Mhm.
amongst the people around me and for myself. So I'm already introspecting a little bit on that. I love
Oh,
that.
me too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's you asked me the question earlier about coaching individuals and successes, right? And
Mhm,
coaching, and I just want to come back to something that you said, Jeff, that in the book, I talk a lot about what I call the 4 V's, right? So the 4 V's is what is your vision, right? What is your value? Meaning, what do you have to add? What are your skills? What are your capabilities, right? How do you want to be valued? Meaning, do I want to be compensated? Do I want my own, you know, uh, company car? Do I want to be able to go to training? And what are my values? That all those things that come together, I think really help you to really start thinking about one, if you're interviewing an opportunity, two, if you're at a company, in terms of the engagement bit, how can you really rally around that? Like how would you answer those questions? And we're seeing, especially in the survey data, moving into the future, that more and more people really want to feel as if they are part of an organization where their value aligns with that organization, right?
mhm,
And not only that, I would think that most people want to know that what they do matters. That's where your value comes in, your capabilities comes in. And it does matter. That matters to the bottom line, right? And I would think it matters to the team. And, hopefully it's going to matter to the individual as well, in that they're getting something out of it, not beyond just the paycheck.
I love it. I think um, when it comes to, I'm curious for your high level take on, because this is something that I struggle with in working with and coaching with others, is you have organizational change needed. So it's easy to say things like your vision aligning with the company vision, but the company is nothing more than a bunch of people as well, right? It's like
Sure.
is it really like your vision lining up with the CEO's vision, or is it your vision lining up with like a written statement? I struggle sometimes with the individual and the whole organization contrasts, right? And I'll give you an example basically of, I think you and I would both agree that, when you want to transform a business, you want to transform a culture, you have to do it at the individual level. Like you have, like I think you just said, behaviors matter and
Mhm.
individual mindsets matter. But then that collection of behaviors and mindsets is what makes the culture, is what makes the whole organization. So how do you approach that, basically, is what I'm asking, because you have many people who are, I guess, showing up to work or showing up to their business and kind of just in a way consuming culture, or at least in their mindset, they are getting to partake in this larger culture that exists and is immovable and unchangeable or whatever. And so they're just in it for better or for worse. If it's a good culture, they get to just enjoy it. If it's a bad culture, they hate it. It's toxic. They just want to get out of it. I rarely see people kind of owning up to their piece of the contribution to culture, because it is
Mhm.
ultimately everybody's individual kind of contributions that make up culture. So where do you begin, I guess, like when you work with people and organizations, who have problems at the organization and individual level, how do you tackle that?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Rubbing my hands together. Where do I start? So, that's a really good question, because I think that what is culture, right? Is culture the statement, like you said, or is it what I see and what I experience? And, I was recently actually just having a conversation with someone, and they were talking about when you go, for example, to a training event, and I'm going to make a parallel here, but when you go to a training event, you don't, studies will tell us that a month later, you don't remember necessarily the content, but you remember the feeling that you got from the training event. And, and 2 months later, you probably have lost 90% of the content, but you kind of say, oh yeah, it was really great. I kind of don't remember what they said though. And the parallel is, I think, is that with culture. Now, I can't remember for most of the companies that I worked for, and I worked for really great companies, what the culture statement was, or even really the behaviors in terms of the written stance. But I do remember the feeling, and I do remember how people showed up. And I think that in cultures of high accountability, people also keep each other accountable, right? Not in a bad way, not in a punishment way. But I think when you lead by example, you influence and you motivate, and people are always watching those around you. And so it's almost like culture or, traditions in your family. It gets passed down, right? Through stories, through what we say, how we're rewarded, how we talk about people, right? And so I think that in companies, you're right, it's the individuals, the people that really live and breathe it. And they live and breathe it, what I would like to say, through the feeling that you get, which I think is also intention, but it's also authentically how you show up. And when there is a toxic culture, I mean, you know what that feels like too. It's unforgettable, right? But when there's a good culture, you can sit back and say, I'm gonna smile on this one because I remember my teammates. I remember how we rallied together. I remember how hard we worked. And like even in the book, I talk about when I had the great fortune of working at American Standard Company. We had a great team, and it felt like we had a very diverse team, but it felt like we were all, I would say, cut from the same cloth. It was like a common thread that, bound us together. And what was that thing? It was the feeling. And I think also the way we held each other up, and we worked together, and we had a personal interest in each other.
Yeah, something you said really reminded me of, I loved what you said about like, you remember the feeling. And I just want to share this really quick story, and Jeff knows this. I've shared this about this company I've worked for before. I don't know if I've shared this story, but we had this list of values, and they were on posters all in the office, and we had to memorize them. When you were a new hire, like you had to memorize them, and in front of the whole company, you would be called out to like recite them in front of everyone, like as a new hire. And they were all like, on paper, great, like integrity, loyalty, like all those like big corporate value words. But I couldn't tell you a single one of them right now, like even though I was supposed to memorize them. But what I do remember is the fact that not a single person ever, ate lunch with me the whole time I worked there. And what I do remember is that on my very last day, like after I'd quit and was leaving, I'd been there for a year, and some girl that I worked with for a year was like, "What was your name again?" Like, that's what I remember about the culture. And like, it's not what companies think culture is like making these big like gestures and coming up with these visions and mission statements and values and sticking them on a poster on the wall and calling it a day. But at the end of the day, that really did nothing for this culture. I don't even remember what they said. So
yeah, so I think it's really, what you're saying is to live it, right? For the individuals to really live it and just show up and exude it. Show me, don't tell me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Audrey, before we run out of time, when does your book release? When do you plan on releasing that book?
This month in February. I don't have an exact
Oh,
date as yet, but it is coming this month in February. And again, it's bold, reign in your mind, reign in your career. And it will be definitely available on Amazon.
Excellent. And maybe when this episode comes out, it'll kind of coincide. This can be like your launch episode. That'd be great.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah. So please go check that out. If it's not out yet, go look for it. If it's out, go buy it. Audrey, thank you so much for taking the time today. Very insightful stuff, and really aligned to, again, you got me thinking introspectively. So that's always something I appreciate in these episodes, and I can really reflect. Hopefully the listeners got the same out of it. And so thank you, Audrey. Thank you for taking the time today.
Jeff and Maggie, my pleasure. Thank you as well for the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you to our listeners. Please be sure to check out Audrey's book and our book, still on Amazon, still there. Love is a Business Strategy. And, you know, if you like the podcast, your first time here, give it a subscribe, give us a rating, tell your friends, all that stuff. Maggie, thank you for hosting with me today. And we will see you all next week.